Hey everybody, Fran here, Rams and Elite Fitness, and I'm here to do a video on sodium. Okay, specifically, most people obtain their sodium in their diets through salt. Okay, sometimes it comes to my attention at different points that there are things that I forget that the general population doesn't just know, essentially, or there are things that are still very controversial to the general population, even though there may be tons of research to support one side versus the other. And salt is one of those things now that has become something that is it's still very, very controversial in terms of, again, the general population. Like, everybody has a tendency to think, what, salt is bad, right? Everyone wants to reduce salt, wants to limit salt. That's just like the natural inclination around that. But lately there have been thorough scientific research to maybe suggest something different. And I think that's what I'm going to talk about today. And just, at the very least, open up some minds, let people research on their own. Again, I'm not here to make people just blindly follow me and believe what I say. I always am up for great discussions or debates, and because debate is good. Debate's what allow people to open up their minds to maybe you can change their minds, or maybe your own position kind of gets changed. It's good for society instead of just kind of believing everything you hear. Okay. So why am I doing this? Well, yesterday, I had on my Instagram account, I had some this individual was either a registered dietitian or a student on her way to be a registered dietitian. And I have the picture here. It's a Giant Eagle frozen meal that I had posted a couple months ago. Okay, this is an older picture, and I posted it mainly if you look at the macronutrients on there. Okay, 330 calories for a serving, 15 grams of fat, 2 grams of carbohydrates, and 43 grams of protein. Okay, those macronutrients are fantastic, especially for somebody in a fat loss diet. When you're only consuming 2 grams of carbohydrate per serving, that's absolutely fantastic. And this individual brought attention to the sodium levels that were in the product. And I just included just 2 quotes from the individual here on the right side. First one, 780 milligrams is ridiculously high, half of what you should get in a day. Any nutritional professional knows sodium intake is a cause of hypertension. Okay, and I don't have a problem with people suggesting something different or being opposed to my viewpoint. It's fine. And I exchanged some responses with the individual, and she was getting very worked up and trying to start typing in all caps and that kind of stuff like that. And I just was I wanted to have a discussion, and the other quote there is new guidelines were just released saying keep sodium at 1,500 milligrams to 2,300 milligrams. I went to school for this. I don't just read articles on the internet. Close quote. So you can see there she's hostile, and I don't care, right? I'm not somebody that gets super offended all the time, but other people, they get so worked up about debate and that everybody should just believe them. And when you logically try to have a discussion with somebody, you're challenging them on their viewpoints. And if anybody's taken like old philosophy, right, with Socrates, the guy was a master at it. Okay, and I'm actually a student of his. I really liked that part of philosophy class and history class, learning about him, where he would show somebody, he tried to essentially catch them holding 2 opposing beliefs, essentially. And I try to do the same thing with people. If I feel they're wrong, I try to show them certain things that are going to be opposed to their own viewpoint. And what happens is most people don't react very well. It's just, they get worked up and they just think you should believe them. And here, this individual clearly doesn't know a thing about me and doesn't follow me on social media very much, because I am one of the biggest advocates of education you will ever find in the fitness industry. I constantly rant and rave about how there's no standard. There's anybody can be a personal trainer, anybody can be a health coach, anybody can do anything in this industry, and I think it's appalling. And I'm the biggest advocate for education ever. Both my employees, I will only hire college-educated people from my staff. Okay, both my trainers, Jessie has exercise science degree, has her bachelor's, and Katie, our newest hire, has a master's degree in exercise physiology and exercise science. So, to suggest that I don't go, and I went to school for it. I have an exercise science degree. Okay, so I went to school for it. And so to suggest that I did not and that I just read internet articles just shows people that, this individual doesn't know what they're talking about and doesn't know me. Okay. And long story short, we had a couple exchanges. I invited her on to do an interview where we could discuss this thing via Skype or whatever phone, and I would record it and post it out, and that people could then watch it and judge for themselves on the merits of who's right and wrong. And long story short, they wanted to avoid that and just kind of said, I'm not here to do no interview. I'm just sharing my view as a professional nutritionist, and that you shouldn't be talking about nutrition. That was the end of it. And again, my invite's always out there, so if there's an individual somehow happens to see this video and knows that I'm talking about them, good. Come on, we'll do the interview anytime. Again, I'm always very respectful, but I'm going to be challenging. We're going to have a debate about this. We don't have to agree, don't have to make nice with each other, but we will be respectful. So, at the very least, I always have that viewpoint. If you're going to challenge somebody, especially if you're going to go to their page and try to rant and rave on it, you're not going to make dictatorial statements on my pages. You're going to be challenged back, and you should always stand up for your own beliefs. And if that's something you truly believe that I'm in the wrong here, you should come on and do the interview. All right, enough of that. Moving on. My question is, why is there this trust in government to tell you what the guideline is? Okay, these agencies, the IOM, Institute of Medicine, and American Heart Association, they're government entities. Okay, they're these boards that put out recommendations, and they suggest that everybody follows them. It's a blanket recommendation. Now, if you guys are big fans of me, I am so against blanket statements. I don't do that with my workouts. All of our workouts are crafted individually. Nutrition has to be approached individual. Supplements approached through an individual attack. You can't just make one statement for everybody to follow. That's not going to be optimal ever. Okay. What I suggest here is this is the same government that in the 80s and 90s set guidelines for dietary fat, and less than 30% of your total calories had to come from fat, and then out of that fat, 10% or less from saturated fat. And now we know both of those guidelines are absolute trash. Eating, avocados, eating healthy dietary fat, and even some saturated fat. Okay, saturated fat isn't this enemy either. Saturated fat, through recent research, has shown to be beneficial, especially if you get it through organic meat. I'm going to pull up here. I'm just going to read from right here. Okay. The National Research Council's Diet and Health Report concluded that reducing total fat and saturated fat consumption was the most important dietary change needed to reduce risk of chronic disease, such as cardiovascular disease and certain cancers. They recommended a total fat intake of 30% or less of calories, saturated fat intake of less than 10% of calories, and less than 300 milligrams of cholesterol daily, 5 or more daily servings of fruits and vegetables, and 6 or more daily servings of bread, cereal, and legumes. So here, 300 milligrams of cholesterol daily, less than that. Let me tell you something. One egg contains about 190, 200 milligrams of cholesterol. So they don't want you to eat anything more than an egg and a half. These are the same people that told you to throw away your eggs and eat egg whites. Now, research has completely obliterated that, and if I have posted as frequently as I have, I eat 3 whole eggs every single day. And that's just cholesterol coming from eggs. There's cholesterol in other sources. I take, that recommendation, they made that at one point, and now they've had to go back on that, right? That's no longer the case. And then here, more laughable, 6 or more daily servings of breads, cereals, and legumes. 6 servings of breads and cereals? Let me tell you something. Recommending dietary fat come down and that you increase your carbohydrates, these are the same organizations that wanted you to eat 50% of your calories from carbohydrate sources. Okay? I'm not pointing the finger at carbohydrate telling you that is the enemy, but do you know what happened in the 80s and 90s with individuals? Yeah, they stopped eating fat. They followed the guidelines. They started eating fat-free cookies, fat-free cake, fat-free this, fat-free that, and guess what happened? People got fatter. Diabetes went on the rise. Nothing to do with dietary fat. Okay, so I wanted to make sure that we understood this thoroughly. And here I have a study pulled up. It's a meta-analysis study. And what that means is essentially they look at multiple studies. This isn't just one study where they take 6 people and do a test. No, they look at multiple studies. And here, in this case, close to 2,500 individuals review the data, review all the information, and they come out with the conclusion that dietary recommendations that were introduced for 220 million U.S. and 56 million U.K. citizens in 1983 were in the absence of supporting evidence from RCTs, which are just randomized control trials. So here you have somebody that looks at all the data and says, I don't know where they got those recommendations from. There's no evidence to support that. Okay, so again, why are we trusting government where the evidence is? Moving on, but doesn't sodium cause hypertension? This was one point that individual on my Instagram account kept wanting to point to is everybody knows that. Everybody knows sodium causes hypertension. Everybody does. Does it? I think to answer this question, you have to understand the relationship between sodium and water. Okay? So what happens when you consume sodium? When you consume salt, okay, you put salt in your food, you eat it. What happens is there becomes an increase of salt in your bloodstream. And water follows sodium. So when you have ions of sodium floating around, water leaves the cells, goes into the bloodstream, okay, increases your blood volume, which thus increases your blood pressure. So, is evident right here. Okay, what people don't understand and forget about is that there is something in the body that, okay, your body regulates itself. There are things your body does which are amazing. Just think about body temperature. Your body hovers around 98.6 on a consistent basis, whether you're out in the freezing cold or you're out on a hot summer day. Your body adjusts. So people forget, and then this is what bothers me when people do like these cleanses, right? Where, oh, I got to cleanse these toxins. No. Your liver and kidneys cleanse itself. You don't need anything else to take some magic supplement that's going to help cleanse things. Your body already rids itself of toxins, okay? So here you have kidneys. People forget about the kidneys, where in regards to the role of high blood pressure, okay? Your kidneys, if it detects blood volume increase and thus blood pressure increase, your kidneys is going to excrete excess salt and water out through the urine and sweat. And that's going to lower your blood pressure and your blood volume again, back to normal levels. People forget about that. When you eat salt, your blood pressure doesn't just stay high indefinitely from salt. Your kidneys, if they function properly, are going to regulate that process and work to lower your blood pressure. This is very, very critical to understand. Moving on. So who's at risk actually here? And this is probably going to be the most important page on this whole slideshow, because this is going to show people who actually should follow the recommendations set forth by the guidelines of the government. Okay? If you have kidney issues, like I just demonstrated, if your kidneys cannot properly regulate blood volume and are not able to excrete excess salt and excess water efficiently, then yes, you're going to have elevated levels of blood pressure on a consistent basis. And you should lower your salt to be proactive around that, and not, not make it harder for your body to regulate blood pressure. If you have a history of heart condition, okay, so when you have higher blood volume, essentially you have what high blood pressure is there's a lot of blood trying to go through the vessels, right, and they're putting force out on the blood vessel walls. And your heart now has to work harder if your blood pressure is high, because it'd be like squeezing, I'm trying to think of something here that's pretty practical. I don't know, let's say you have a very thin tube, and you're trying to squeeze through. It's like getting your milkshake, right? You're drinking a milkshake, and you're trying to suck through the straw of the ice cream. The ice cream's thick, right? Thick, it has a lot of volume to it. It goes through very, very slowly, right? You have to suck really, really hard the thicker the ice cream is. That's kind of what happens here with your mouth and being the heart. So your heart has to work harder now to push through blood if it's higher volume. So if you have a heart condition, yeah, you don't need to add stress on your heart. Keep your salt low. You don't need to have higher blood pressure. And then last is a history of high blood pressure. Let's say you go and you're hypertensive, right? You get diagnosed. Then yes, you should lower your salt, because that's going to automatically lower your blood pressure. But these are the individuals that should really keep an eye on that salt level, because if you're at risk of having high blood pressure on a consistent basis, why would you consume extra salt to just add on top of that to make sure that, to make it harder for yourself to regulate down the blood volume? I'm going to switch gears and I'll talk about why you actually need sodium, and why I don't know why it's become this big villain in terms of the dietary guidelines. Maybe that registered dietitian can give me a tip here. Sodium is a mineral that your body needs to sustain itself for life. If you don't have sodium, you will die. Okay, there are things in your body on a cellular level that sodium is responsible for, mainly electrical charges for nerve impulses and for muscle contraction. Okay, when you lift weights, you need salt. You need sodium. It's responsible for muscle contraction. If you're on some sort of low sodium diet, your results in the gym from working out are going to be hampered. There's no doubt about it. You need proper salt levels for muscle activation. Okay, I have an image here. People that taking a degree will kind of understand. I do not want to go too much detail because this is for the general population. But here's your cell. Salt, potassium work together. This is your salt potassium pump. But they create energy, which results in muscle contraction. Okay, but you absolutely need salt. It's critical. So how much, this is the wrap up here, how much should I eat if I'm not at risk? Okay, so excluding those individuals we mentioned earlier, if you're just the average person, you're healthy, you're young, you're old, whatever, if you're healthy, especially if you work out often, you do need to consume sodium. And actually, there is a chart here. It's a U-shaped graph. Now, I couldn't find a specific one, and I'm not going to dig all day for one, so this is just, ignore the numbers, just look at the graph shape. This represents people who consume salt or sodium. Okay, so if this is the graph that starts at 0, let's say that this is your sodium intake. High sodium intake over here, low sodium intake here. And then on this line, you're going to have health risks. So low health risk, medium health risk, and then high health risk. Research has now shown that if you consume low sodium, especially if you do not need to focus on that, let's say you're a healthy individual, if you consume low sodium, you're actually increasing your health risks. Diabetes, you become insulin sensitive, you raise your bad cholesterol. In some instances, what happens is when you consume low sodium, you actually increase your risk of cardiovascular disease. Okay, what happens is your body produces, there's this protein, angiotensin. Okay, and what it does is to increase your blood pressure. Since you're not consuming salt, you don't have that whole process where the volume gets thicker because water comes out. So what happens in order to increase your blood pressure, angiotensin constricts the vessels down on the less blood volume to increase blood pressure, essentially. And what research has shown is that process actually damages those blood vessels and causes them to be permanently thick and permanently to raise your blood pressure, that it doesn't reverse itself like water. Your body can't excrete the thickened blood vessels. So there is this U-shaped graph. So if you're eating low sodium without really having to focus there, you might be doing yourself more harm than good. Okay, there's this range here in the middle that research has shown between 2,000 and 4,000 milligrams daily to be a nice middle spot where your risk is the lowest. And again, this is for healthy individuals. This isn't for somebody that's got kidney issues and heart disease. Okay, this is for the average individual that goes to the gym, that works out, has proper kidney function, no heart history, everything's good to go. And of course, obviously, if you consume super high amounts of sodium, yeah, they are going to have issues with blood pressure. Okay, but I just want to be sure to mention there have been some fringe studies that show as high as 9,000 milligrams can be okay. Again, it's a fringe study. I understand this is not the norm for everybody, but I take issue with, for instance, the government came out with those guidelines of low sodium for everybody because people that had high blood pressure, that's how they treated it. They were to reduce their salt, and they're making the claim essentially that, well, since it worked here for this individual and made them more healthy, if everybody eats this way, it's more healthy for everybody. That's essentially what their claim is. So my problem is the inverse of something, okay? In other words, the opposite of something isn't necessarily true. So just because you lower salt on an individual that has high blood pressure and that works, doesn't mean that the reason that, having high salt automatically makes you have hypertension. So I reject the theory that high blood pressure alone, or that sodium rather, high levels of sodium alone, if you isolate that alone does not necessarily result in hypertension. Okay, I don't believe in the inverse of things. I don't just think the opposites are true without research to back it up. So here's my advice to everybody. Focus on calories and macronutrients. In this day and age, when we have obesity levels and overweight individuals up at 67% of the total populace, we don't need to be sitting here talking about something that may or may not even be factual, okay, about salt and sodium. You know what is factual? Is calories. If you're consuming more calories than you're burning off, you're going to be gaining fat weight. Most diets, okay, that I've analyzed and help people with, they fall within about 3,000 milligrams. Okay, so your typical diet, you don't have to watch out for anything because most people fall within this range here. They fall right about 3,000, 3,500. And again, there's been studies that show between 3,000 and 6,000 are fine, but one thing is there's more research that show above these recommended levels set forth by the government are completely fine in healthy individuals. So much for just reading internet articles and having my opinions formed by nonsense, right? And if any individual out there are curious about these studies, let me know. Like I don't want to sound generic when I just keep saying, well, research shows this, research shows that, but if you're someone that wants access to the studies and wants to read through them or something like that, just message me on Facebook, email me. I'll be more than happy to provide that to you. Okay, I just don't think for a quick, a decent video. I'll be here for an hour if I include every study and go through every little study with everybody. And most people, it's information overload, right? They're not able to understand, in plain terms, exactly all that information. But look, I'm not hiding anything. I never have. If you followed me since day one, I'm not here to confuse people. I'm not here to trick people. I'm here to let them know the facts. Okay, so to wrap this up, sodium levels, if you have one of those risk factors we mentioned earlier, kidney, heart, or blood pressure issues, yes, go ahead and reduce your salt to the recommended guidelines set forth by the government. Go ahead and follow those guidelines, but not everybody needs to follow those guidelines. I don't, and I know it's anecdotal, but I just want to get all my levels checked. I have A+ blood pressure, my cholesterol levels, I have my HDLs, which are my good cholesterols, are high. My bad cholesterol, LDLs, are low. Total cholesterol, low. I don't have any issues. I eat 3 eggs a day, so my cholesterol level is over recommended guidelines from the government from the 80s. I eat salt whenever I want. I put salt on stuff because I think it tastes great. There's a reason your taste buds crave salt. It's because it needs it. Just like sugar. Sugar is something you need for the brain, right? Your brain likes glucose. So, it's not like that's the reason you don't crave grass or dirt, because there's no nutritional value for it in the human body. So again, focus on your calories, guys. Sodium is not this humongous issue that you need to really consistently look at, and that if you were to look at this product, if you were to consider buying this to eat, these macronutrients are fantastic. High protein, low carb, low calorie for dinner. You shouldn't look at this and go, oh, but the sodium is 780 milligrams. Nah, I'm going to put it back. No. This I'm trying to get to is that sodium does not override all the other health benefits of something like this. Under those guidelines between 2,000 and 4,000, you could actually consume 3 to 5 of this alone a day. And this is high in sodium. So, there's meals that you have that have very little to no sodium, right? Very little sodium in some other meals. But you can have 5 of these and still be all right under the guidelines. So, look, make sure you're putting emphasis on things you need to worry about, and don't apply broad blanket statements to yourself when it comes to health and fitness. Especially if you work out, you need sodium. Your body will excrete the excess through urine and sweat. You'll be good to go. Hope this helps some individuals. If you have questions, want to talk about it, you think I'm incorrect or whatever, go ahead and leave comments. I'm welcome to everybody like that. All right? Thanks, guys, for watching.